So because some of you we know have to go at 12, we actually wanted to start with just a show of hands on a couple of these questions. So thinking of you as an individual in your organization, do you see the need for this type of collaboration? And maybe it's a slightly modified form, but in general, could you put your hand up if you see the need for this type of collaboration? Ooh, overwhelming, yes. And I should ask for no's as well. So anybody not see the need for this type of collaboration? It's just a, okay, absolutely.
I'm being a bit facetious, but I think we all have different understanding of what this type of collaboration is right now.
We have a different understanding of it. Right. Easy to agree on something you don't understand.
We all have had collaboration, I think that's great, but what type, I think is
Exactly what it looks like. So hopefully we're going to further define that as we go today, and of course moving forward we'll further define it. So you all see the need for it, and then the second related part of the question is, would your specific organization be interested in being part of a collaborative structure like this? So if the answer is yes, put your hand up. So Bob's got two hands. Great. So generally yes, and anyone not interested or just doesn't feel like the right fit for your organization? I know there were some people who didn't put their hand up, but you're shy. But generally it seems like, okay, so this is a good model to pursue. Obviously there is going to be some further definition and adaptation of it. So that's the second part of the discussion. We're not going to go around the table systematically. We're going to ask for your thoughts in a plenary format here. So given that it sounds like this, we do need this type of collaboration, does this particular structure that we've proposed seem like the right structure? Do you have any thoughts on that? What's needed to really make it a success? That's what we're most interested in. So if we're going to move this forward, what needs to happen? How do we need to structure the organization, the collaboration to make it a success? And if you've got comments about where do you see your organization fitting into this, how would you see yourself participating? So thoughts generally from the floor on this, and I'm going to ask Deb to start with, and we do have mics, so if we could give Deb a mic, and yeah, please stand up and tell us who you represent before you speak.
Thank you. It's not clear that I represent anyone, but my name is Deborah Kern, and I work in the Faculty of Law at the University of Victoria, in particular with an NGO called the Environmental Law Centre. And I've also been involved in sort of land use issues, but from a law side for about 20 years in BC. So just two comments. The first is it's not clear to me what kind of leadership structure is appropriate in BC at this point in time, in particular what scale. So yes, there are some province-wide things, but I think given that 80% of the population sort of lives on 2% of the land base, maybe, you know, from a scale perspective, we might want to focus on that particular area. And so perhaps the Real Estate Foundation could make a commitment for example, 2 years to be a convener, and then leadership will emerge from that particular convening function. So that's just one idea. The second idea is we were looking at our table at examples, and the one I was trying to remember was a Coalition for a Livable Future from Portland, Oregon, that was in place for 20 years. They shut their doors in 2014, but it was a coalition of faith, transportation, affordable housing, equity, and land use groups who came together to set 5 or 6 regional priorities for Portland. They then went out and got funding to fund over 94 organizations to bring about the actual achievement of those 5 or 6 priorities. So it's a very interesting example, and perhaps even more interesting would be to ask why they operated for 20 years and then decided that they weren't needed anymore.
They just fixed all the problems, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think so, but maybe.
Great, thank you, Deb. Okay, Bob at the back.
Yeah, thanks for that. And just to build on that point about leadership, one of the things that came up for this group is the conclusion that it should be tight, not loose, that this larger collaborative be populated by hopefully decision makers of the key interests, or at least decision influencers, and that those members of that collaborative have a shared purpose and a commitment to the process. And that ideally in the implementation phases through the collectives, specific topics, that there be some connection point between the leadership group and the collectives. And the collectives could be a rural collective or an urban collective or an energy collective or whatever. But the point being, though, that the leadership, rather than being loose, needs to be tight, and there needs to be continuity. There's nothing, no such thing as a one workshop miracle. There needs to be commitments away from the table, very sound terms of reference. And if a chair, you know, I've seen the kiss of death on many processes where the chair of a given process has a single interest agenda. So the design of the process, the engagement, and the facilitation of that needs to be impartial. It needs to be a safe table, and it needs to be representative of those who actually can action on what comes up through the consensus process. Now, I could riff on longer. There's lots of great wisdom coming out of this group, but certainly there was a strong sentiment about not being a talk fest, that it has to be complementary with existing initiatives. So you need to build on what's already being done as opposed to establishing a parallel. You need to have a good capacity to support it. You need to have a very strong measurement framework. Measurement of success, both in terms of the process, but also the outcomes on the ground. That there's a need also to demonstrate the early successes and to be able to communicate those early successes so the naysayers hopefully join the team as opposed to staying in naysayer mode. And that success story or stories is a great way to reach out to the public. And I think it came up earlier that there's a strong sentiment around engaging the public, not just communicating to the public, but engaging the public and raising the game on the cultural shift that needs to happen. Living in a complete community is not a bad thing. It's great. So I think that's there's lots more there, but we'll leave it there. Thanks.
That's wonderful, Bob. Yeah, that's great. Thank you for that table. Some really good, solid suggestions for success. Thanks very much.
Tom Pierre Frappé St. Claude, Pembina Institute. General structure of this idea as a structure for as a model for collaboration makes sense. The question to me is who and what topic. So if we're going to create collaboration for transformation by definition only happens if you can have depth in your conversation. Otherwise, we will rehash the same general ideas and reinstate the status quo. And it's actually kind of dangerous. We can just get prone to groupthink. And there's a metric around the broadness of the topic, the number of parties involved, create kind of a two-dimensional area. And the amount of depth you can have is limited by these two, obviously. And the amount of time and money you can put into it. So there's a balancing act there. Right. And for me, it's an iterative design question. It's like, what's the gap? What's the barrier we're trying to address? Who are the people that need to be there to address it? How can we restrict that sufficiently with enough breadth to have creative thinking, but with enough focus that we can get depth? And how much money and time do we have to convene these people? Right. And if the money and time we have, given the breadth of the topic and the breadth of the people we want to bring, it's not enough to go in depth, then we need to focus the question more. Right. And work iteratively until we have a question that's focused enough that we can get the depth to actually create transformation. That's
a great caution to us, and I think something we did struggle with and think about as we came up with this proposal. And if you think about what's happened over the last 20 years, we have become more focused. Like what we 20 years ago, 10 years ago, we were having more general sustainability and smart growth conversations, and we've moved away from those. And I think in a way, that's kind of what we've flagged, that there's a danger of moving away from the general conversation and kind of keeping your eye on the overall prize. But at the same time, I think you're absolutely right that you have to be very careful that it's not so general that it becomes meaningless. So providing that balanced perspective is important. So who else would like to say something? Peter?
So I've got Elizabeth Sheehan over here. Before I pass the mic to you, we've got about 5 minutes left. So if you can keep your comments reasonably short, balance the depth-breadth thing. And if anyone sort of in the front 4 tables there would like to have something to say, put your hand up so Nick knows where to go.
Great. I will be brief. I just wanted to add from our table that we had a sort of resounding yes, great in theory, challenging in practice. So a couple of things around the practice that we think will make it easier. Clarifying scope, focusing on shared outcomes, and even had a little bit of a conversation, do we develop principles? Can we just share outcomes? Looking at diverse methods of collaborating. So lots of different formats to really think about, for us, how do we engage businesses versus other kinds of stakeholders that might be part of the collaborative. I think in the end we talked about this would be extremely successful in terms of focusing and aligning our efforts. So a little less on learning and more about kind of gathering this potent influence that we can have more collectively together, a consistency of message, and leveraging our resources. And all in all, sort of making sure we're focused on action and outcome.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, got time for probably a couple more comments from the floor here.
All right, I'm going to go fast. Karen Tan Wu with the Pembina Institute. So at our table, there was general agreement also with the collaboration. Some of the organizations represented around the table already have quite a bit of experience in convening and collaborating, so learning from those and drawing from those and building from that would be important. And also a note in terms of making sure that there's diversity represented in the collaborative efforts, because right now in the room there's quite a bit of homogeneity. So how do we bring in other players in the various sectors that are represented, others from geographic areas, and diversity and ethnicity and whatnot. And again, reiterating some of the pieces around focus.
Great, thanks, Karen.
So I'm Tanya Wigwitz with BC Transit, and our table, some of the things that we came on, adding on to what was here, was again around the structure of it, that we saw a need for both within sector, but then also importantly across sector, and that seemed to be a real value. We wanted to talk about a strategic plan and have some idea of what the shorter term actions might be, and the larger major actions might be, but also ensure that that plan was nimble enough that it could adjust to how policy and government changed as we affected it. And in terms of the structure of this, we thought that, yes, have an online platform, but our experience with similar types of platforms is that to make it work, you really need someone there or a few people who are there with the responsibility of activating it and making it work. And we also felt that we needed to have situations like this where we drew people together across various sectors, and we figured on a twice per year basis would be about right. And Stephen here had an example of Portland's Intertwine Alliance, that seems to be the framework that they use to great success.
Mike
Great.
Tanner
Thanks,
with
Tanya.
the Partnership for Water Sustainability. One of the things we discussed, and it's something that I found several times attending conferences and those types of things, especially like this, is where there's other organizations, NGOs, societies, whatever, that have very similar goals. And one of the things perhaps that the REFBC could do would be provide funding for some research to take a look at all the societies, and there are thousands, I recognize that, but to see where there's a point where different societies have the same goals, are doing the same work in some situations, and being able to put those two societies together so that they're not competing or duplicating efforts. And there's no central location now or no central person that can say, water, these guys are doing the same things. Why don't you talk? Why don't you interact with each other, because you're doing the same things?
Right.
And I think that way you're going to get a lot better collaboration in all. Thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, great. Thanks, Mike. And I think we've got time for one more question before we wrap it up with a few final comments. Jeanine.
Got it. Jeanine de la Salle with Urban Food Strategies. Our conversation echoed a lot of the points around the room, but I want to, I think a nice takeaway for Real Estate Foundation is that whatever happens, it needs an anchor or a backbone organization to galvanize, convene, and move things forward, even if that's a temporary role in the beginning. And that this will take time. This is major societal shift. This is not going to happen overnight. And for us to set our expectations and timelines accordingly, so we're not all pulling our hair out while we're trying to make our lives easier and having more impact in the community. The second piece I wanted to mention that hasn't come up yet is that a key success factor may be evidence that the collaboration is working. So we need to study the collaboration, whatever form that is and whatever stage it's in. Is it working? Is it not working? Making course corrections accordingly. And then also, let's not forget that the whole reason for this collaboration is to improve the healthy built environment. So are we seeing those sustainability metrics change or shift, whether that's the modal split, Rob, that you showed up before, or other indicators? Are we seeing meaningful change in the healthy built environment as a direct result of collaboration? I think because this is untested and uncharted territory, that's going to be key, and setting those systems up initially. Great, thanks.
That's great. Great way to finish. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, so thank you those who, well, thank you to all of you for some really great ideas, actually. So I think we are super happy with how this has turned out. And, you know, it was great to see that show of hands and that so many people are interested in this form of collaboration. Because we, you know, we had our doubts. We were like, are people really going to be interested in this? Aren't they in their silos and quite happy? But it sounds like there is a great deal of interest in forming an organization that is that foundational organization that can really look across sectors and make progress on a broader set of issues, but at the same time kind of really recognizing that point that you made about we do need to focus, and we heard it from several of you that yes, great to have a broad mandate, but there also needs to be a focus mandate and a focused set of questions that we need to address. We heard quite a bit about leadership as well and who that leadership group needs to be. And, you know, Bob's point about really having a tight leadership group that's there and present and continues in that role and doesn't just kind of come in and out of the process, I think is a really important one as well. So, sorry, just looking at some notes here just to reflect on what you just said. So it sounds like a resounding yes for some interest to go forward. I think we've got some thinking to do as part of the group and the Real Estate Foundation about, okay, what is the Real Estate Foundation's role in this? I think, Janine, your point about it starting off as a backbone organization and providing some initial resources and funding, I think that's a great idea, and I think that probably resonates with the foundation. And that doesn't mean it has to be, you know, the organization that's doing all the coordination over the long period of time, but I think certainly to start the process off and keep this momentum going, that's a really important role. And you know, this comment about making sure we've got the full diversity of the sector and really the province represented, and it's always a struggle to get all the different sectors and broad cross-section of society involved in these things, but I think it is something that we need to make sure we do because ultimately, we have to show that there is value. I think, you know, that's a key message. We have to show that there is value to the province at large and people in their communities. This is not a single sector or single interest group initiative. It has to show value very broadly, has to show value to the public and to decision makers. So having all the right people in the room, absolutely. And Deb, thanks for letting us know that there are other models out there that are similar and have been successful. We feel slightly less crazy than we did at the beginning of the session, so appreciate that. So, all in all, really appreciate everybody's time, and I'm going to turn it over to Jack Wong to say a few closing remarks.
Thanks, Robert. I just want to say a big, huge thank you for everybody spending a morning, whether it was a really sunny morning outside. I'd really say a bigger thank you, but you know, being so terrible out there, you know, on behalf of the staff and the board of the Real Estate Foundation, I really appreciate all the input that you provide us, allowing us to share and report out on the research findings, as well as the poll results. Now, the full report and the full poll details are on our website. It's quite detailed, quite comprehensive, but there's a lot of good stuff in there. Might be of a lot of interest to a lot of you folks here. Also, you know, thank you also to give us your comments and your sense of your priorities. That's a big help to us at the foundation, because being and taking a collaborative approach is a strategic shift for us as a grant maker, and to be a little bit more impactful and effective. So I think whether you actually have done work with us in the past or you were thinking about doing some work with us, we would love to, you know, work together as a collaborative group to kind of make some impactful and transformational change in this province. So thank you for that. I just want to make one more final note that we will be taking this input that you've provided to us this morning and take it forward to our board. Our next board meeting is in March, and we will share this morning with them and let them know that there is some appetite from the different sectors, and we hope that we can kind of follow up on our next steps after that. So again, thank you very much for being here, and please, if you have any questions or any more comments, get hold of Leanne, not me, but Leanne, David, and we got Hetty here from the grants team. Nick's here from our staff as well. So, and Stephanie, thank you very much for putting all this together in terms of the handouts and graphics that you saw this morning. So thank you very much.